Is pay transparency really transparent? Welcome to Tip That Scale and episode 10, where we're talking about money. Join us as we discuss PRBLs, that's pay ranges before layoffs, and what's being offered now. What are your salary expectations? They were working for a company, the company was throwing a lot of money at them, and now they may not recognize that what you were getting before, when the market was really like, oh, here's extra money, money. But in truth, your experience doesn't align with that.
Was there highly inflated salaries being bounced around by some of these big old companies? 100%. 170, 180 range for someone like at the like a head of a department or the director or even a senior manager is not out of the question. But when you start offering them 110, 120, that's low.
No. And I completely agree with that. I completely agree. And I'm just
Yeah.
wondering from the standpoint of where these companies are. Is it based on the funding that they were having before that they aren't getting now? And now they think they have to be truer to it. And then I'm also thinking about how the company is structured, because some of them are undercutting. If you're looking for someone to be a head of a department at 110, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So then my question is, what's going on with y'all? That this is what you're doing. Is it because you're undercutting? Is it because you don't have funding? What are the other reasonings behind it? So that's all I was thinking about.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
like,
part
just
of
to
it
give you an idea.
maybe
Oh,
that
sorry, go
they've
ahead,
got
Ron.
400 applicants, right? And they think, oh,
Yeah.
here's our opportunity to
Right.
take advantage of that. And I think that's
So
a
I've
little
spoken to
high.
other people in our industry, right, that have been going through some of these interview processes and things like that. They're still seeing the same stuff that we did, even if they had, like, let's just say they have 1,000 applicants. Maybe 10% of those 1,000 applicants are even remotely qualified to do the role.
Mhm.
You see 1,000 people, but 10% of those are who your competition is.
Right.
So still
100.
apply. And, well, yeah, I mean, it's still 100, but those 100 people are applying to 100 other jobs too. I mean, the roles are there, but what is going on right now is that two issues. One, these newer supply demand salary ranges that are out there right now aren't keeping up with the range of inflation. Number one. And two, they're thinking, yeah, there's just 100 other people that could out there that could do the same thing, and oh, somebody's going to take this. First of all, don't settle for that. If you've got the experience and you were making money that was aligning with the current situation and the role that you're looking at 3 years ago, let's just take the last 3 years. The last 3 years should be a wash in salary caps and everything else because of the craziness that the market trend went. But if you take a look at the salaries for, let's just say, a senior recruiter, somebody with like 10 years of experience, 8 years of experience, it is not out of the question for them to get paid 110, 120. Right? When you start paying people with, again, I go back to the 4 year mark, which is what was happening at the Googles, the Metas, and all these other companies, 120 to 130. That's different. And because of these bigger companies that were throwing out these massive salary ranges, these other smaller companies had to try to compete with that,
Right.
which they couldn't at the point in time. So it became very difficult for them to even find a 3 or 4 year recruiter to come in because you got blah, 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 paying them 110, 120. And even at our organization, our previous one, why do you think there were so many recruiters coming back saying, hey, I need a pay raise, I need a pay raise, I need a pay raise? And it was constant. It's because these other companies are reaching out to them saying that. Like, we tried to keep our roles and our pay ranges aligned to what the role was. And there are certain instances that, we overpaid on the engineering aspect of things and things like that. But TA was very well aligned. So there are organizations still out there paying, but it's some of these smaller ones that I don't know if they can't afford it or they're just not putting that big of an importance on TA or even the HR functions. But that's something that really needs to be looked at through the organizational side.
I agree with you. The last 3-4 years is a wash. I was going to say 2019, third and fourth quarter of 2019, you start seeing that rise. The reason I'm asking this or talking about it is, and I think it is a good conversation, is because it's going to help people level set. Now, granted, inflation is also a piece of that, which I do believe those higher salaries have added to that.
Yeah.
So then where do you topple out and you level set? The other thing that's concerning for me is that some people, and I'll use this for myself as well. I was at a certain salary and then I actually took a step back wanted to get a job because I hadn't gotten a job. And I was like, okay, no worries. But also looking at how I could offset those costs. Granted, this is pre-inflation. I mean, everything is
Yep.
inflation. Every year is inflation in one way or another. But I was like, how can I
2%.
offset that cost? And the way I offset it was, number one, it was closer to home. That in and of itself was huge. And so I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. So they don't necessarily look at years of experience. If you have 20 years experience and you're being paid, let's just say 165 per role, but then someone
Mhm.
else is younger, they have 2 years experience, they will think, oh, for this role, this is the salary. They're not necessarily thinking about the years of experience that went into that. We aren't having enough of these conversations from the company standpoint, from leader standpoint, and then also even I would say even from a coaching standpoint to say, whoa, your years of experience doesn't align with this. And people don't do research either. They don't go to salary.com or pay.com to see historically, I'll say a lot of people don't, to see historically what those pay ranges are. And now we have that other little piece of the pie that companies have to share. They're being transparent. They have to be transparent about salaries in the job description or the job posting. And so you can have 74,000 to 175,000, and people don't necessarily think that I'm more at a 80,000, not the 160,000.
So I mean, I think pay is always a lagging indicator, right? I mean,
Yep.
you've got inflation. So you just mentioned it. We're 3 years into pays getting out of control. It was at the tail end of good times. They rise. Then you have inflation that really kicks in heavy. So they're trying, even at the last where we just came out of a good pay raise did not offset the increases in inflation. So
Right.
now you've got inflation being stubborn and just won't go away. But you've got these companies who are already saying, okay, lots of people out there, we're trying to drive down costs. We start with pay, either eliminating it or lowering salaries, wages, whatever you want to call the makeup of them. Therefore, pay is it's the leader on the front end of this in terms of the change in the economic makeup right now. So we want to drive prices down. We do that, but yet we still have inflation sitting there that's so high that people can't afford to take a cut. So,
Right.
it's one of those you can't win for losing situations. But
Yeah.
pay is always it just gets a good bump up increase, and now it's time to take it down because of the market change.
I'd almost say let's just take years of experience out and just put experience.
Mhm.
What have you done that warrants your pay range to be this high? Right. Example, a global organization, wants me to run an organization of TA recruiters within multiple geographic locations, international, not just here in the US, right?
Mhm.
Multiple time zones, understanding the cadence, the nuances and the cadences of this country, this country, this country, understanding the legalities behind it, and also understanding each one of those team members in multiple different cultures, right? I'm sorry, that's not 110, 120.
No.
That's on a completely different level and scale of leading an organization. It's based on what you've done and what you've accomplished. That's what it should be. You just put the
And what
years of
you've seen
experience
too,
in your
right?
game. Exactly.
It comes in what battles have you been through? How the beat
Mhm.
downs, the get back ups. Those are the true measures of experience. And there's 20-year-olds
Emotional
or
intelligence.
20-year recruiters that haven't had those experiences, right? They haven't been thrown into the right
Yep.
place to really get a
Right.
mix. So yeah, but that's that's hard to measure, especially at somebody you don't know you're talking to. I think a lot of these
And
places
that's
are
why we
looking
put
at
the years
now.
on there.
A
So
lot of these places are looking at, can we get by with a 4-year recruiter? Right now we can. We're not hiring much.
yeah.
It's cheaper on the books. We'll go that way, unless you can find a 20-year recruiter looking to take a 4-year. recruiter salary.
I
So-
mean, think about just our roles in our previous company, right? They used to have this saying that a year at that organization was 5 years somewhere else. I'd agree with them. The reason I would agree with them is that in that 1 year time span, we saw so many different things, so many different changes, and so many different things that we personally had to deal with that, again, and this is probably going on in a lot of other organizations. It was just chaos.
do you think that applies to everyone? That everyone in the company, a year there equals to 5? You know,
No.
it's kind of what I call the dog years.
Is it showing the importance or is it showing the need right now, right? If you're not hiring a lot of people, you don't have a lot of challenges and issues for experienced people to get through and understand, do you need that right now? No, I would say when it gets hot and heavy and busy like we just came out of, yeah, it's a great thing to have experienced team members that can deal with those things. Yeah, it gets crazy, but they put it down and move on to the next problem without all the stoppage of what's going on. So I think that's a piece of it too. And I think
I would
this is
almost
a
say that,
time.
yeah, I mean, I would almost say that you don't need teams as big as they were, but you do need experience, at least someone coming in that's capable of doing these things that you're asking them to do, run an entire organization, having the emotional intelligence to be able to run not only the business side of things, but also understanding their teams.
I think you have to look at too, what's left from the leadership standpoint. So you still have probably your leaders that were there that did these decisions on who was getting cut, who was staying. And we already have seen from experience or just from looking around, a lot of the experienced, probably higher cost employees have been let go at this point.
Well,
So that helps these managers who made those decisions. Their goal is to stay below the radar right now, right? I mean, they can say, okay, it comes around for the next cuts. Hey, I gave up my senior people. I can't afford to lose any more. I've got less experienced people. They're under the pay bands that we were under before. Go somewhere else and look for the cuts. I can't do it. So that I think that's another objective. And then if you think about even if the places that do have these openings for recruiters and developers and HR people and whatever group you fell under, now you have a lot of the recruiters that are sitting there that are doing these initial interviews and screens and everything. A lot of those people are younger and less experienced at this point. So people like to promote or move forward or interact and interview and deal with people who are more on the level that they are, people who they can have conversations with, who they can not feel like they're being overshadowed by. So I think you're going to see more, we've talked about before, ageism, things like that show
Yep.
up and raise its head because
yeah.
of the makeup that's left there. And it's not by their choice. They were left there for multiple reasons. They may have been great, but a lot of times it's because they were the lower cost option and they fit the bill at the time. So I think people are going to run into that where you're going to see, you're getting overlooked because the person doing the looking is less experienced.
Take it outside of the candidate experience for a second, but let's just say an organization hires someone that is getting paid drastically less than what they were. How much are you actually going to get out of that person? And how happy are they going to be at that organization? Or are they always going to have that, the eyes on the back of their head constantly looking for something else?
That's going to happen. I would say that's definitely because right now,
Eventually.
initially, absolutely. Because right now, people want to get back to work. They want to have an income coming in. So for some people, they won't, hopefully, I'll say this, hopefully they won't devalue themselves too much because to the point, and I've gone through that where honestly, there was a time I was having such a hard time finding a job. This was more than several years ago. And we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes about the desperation. And I interviewed for, now I'm living in California, first of all, and I interviewed for a position that I was desperate because no one was giving me any time of day, probably because of ageism. We'll not talk about that right now. And the pay, I knew they were going to offer it to me because I'm that good. The pay was $45,000. I was like, I know. I was like, okay, excuse me. And not just $45,000, but because of my experience, because of where I lived and the cost of living, honestly, $45,000, that's going back not just 10 years, 20 years, that's more than 30 years of me in my working life. But that desperation had me in the moment, and I'm like, no, no, because I knew that even still, no matter what I cut out of my life, no matter what kind of changes I made, that still wouldn't have been able to cover what need, and inflation wasn't even a conversation at that time. So you can take a position that's less than what you were making before, but don't devalue yourself, especially when you have the experience and the additional skills that you bring to the table. That's the problem. And we don't want companies to take advantage of that, but we see that they are.
Even
And I
if you
think
did take a lower paying role, allow the person to be able to do things on the side to supplement what that is, right? A lot of companies don't want you to take two jobs of the same thing just because they feel like it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
well, I think that you're going to run into that though. We go through those phases of okay,
Yep.
we've been through these before, these cycles where people take such a decrease in the pay that they were in, out of whether it be desperation or what have you. I mean, at the end of the day, some people look at it and are forced to look at it as I still have these bills. Right now, I'm making zero. That 45,000 or whatever you talked about, Nicole, may be the difference in getting these bills pushed off for a little bit now or paid off a little bit now until I can get into something better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those jobs they usually kind of bury you in the day to day to where that's all you can do. You can't even really successfully look for better or other jobs. But it does, I mean, it depends on the person's situation, whether they can wait longer or they've
Mhm.
got to take something just to survive and keep their head above water. So, but this is the stage where people start to take that job and then you find another job. So you're working 2 and 3 jobs where these phases come in until life gets better, things get better.
Right.
And yeah, sometimes they can't be in the same industry because of conflicts,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes they can. I mean, people just it's that day job, night job, whatever you got to do. I mean, it's survival, unfortunately.
What about sales? Do y'all hear
Sales?
anything about sales cutting those base salaries and commission structures in sales? Have y'all heard anything about that?
Well,
I
no, because those base
basic,
salaries are,
they're
yeah,
low.
yeah, they're pretty low as it is. It's,
You lose out on your opportunity from your commission standpoint just because the market isn't buying as much, depending on what
yeah.
Of the
market you're
selling.
in.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you lose more of your money that way, and you're a lot of times you're unable to hit those milestones you need to hit to even stay there and keep the base salary because of the market. So it's
Hmm.
another one of those situations.
Yeah, I mean, even some of the agency contacts that I've had conversations with them over the last few weeks, and even they're unable to do the same things that they were doing 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years ago right now because the business just isn't there,
Because
right?
of salary. I mean, you're talking about salaries, right?
No,
The
not just
commission.
salaries. I'm talking about the commissions, right? The
Oh,
business just
right.
isn't there for them to sell into right now. Let's just take it from, yeah, I mean, any agency right now. I mean, there are some companies that are offloading a lot of the work, but as of right now, what most organizations are doing is holding everything as close to the chest, and they're trying to pull away from areas where they look at them as expenditures. The new innovation piece of it, like a lot of the innovation that's coming out or was supposed to come out, is kind of slow, but it'll slow on the major organizations. Like you're going to see some of these startups and things like that start popping up that are going to start solving the issues that the big organizations were trying to tackle before this happened. And now those same people that were working on the big issues that these organizations are trying to tackle, they're doing it for themselves, or they created their own organizations, or other smaller organizations have picked up on it. Again, jobs are out there, but they're not at the same level of what they were.
Well, you saw the numbers
And
this week. I
so,
mean, for this week for January, jobless claims were down, hiring up, inflation up. I mean, this market just won't give up the ghost right now, and everybody's just so anxious for the fast fix, and it just isn't coming. Even the Feds. I mean, they're looking for the interest rates to bite, and they do for a little, and then it raises its head and goes the opposite way. So companies just don't know what to do, and they're still trying to hire,
Well,
and people are taking jobs. But I do think part of that is people are taking jobs for lesser pay and salary at this point.
well, the Fed is in charge of two things: keeping inflation down and making sure everybody has jobs. In the grand scheme of things, to them, what's more important is just to be able to keep the rate of inflation down so the dollar stays up based on the
Right.
world economy.
Yep. Yep.
They're
And they're
willing
looking for
to,
employment to go down. That's one of their indicators right now. They want to see it go down. It keeps rising. So what's their answer? Raise the rates some more.
Mhm.
yeah, and so
And
they're
I,
going to keep doing that until there's a breaking point, right?
and I think it's important to add that when we're talking about jobs, availability of jobs, that there are jobs out there. And I always look at you, AJ, because you shake your head like, no, there aren't. I think, I think what's really important to say is, where are those jobs? Because
Yeah.
if you're looking for jobs in the same place, that doesn't happen. And that's where, and we've talked about it before. We have episodes, the career shift, the career transition, the pivot, because there are some jobs in other areas, in other industries that some people aren't thinking about, and those become more prevalent. I'll go back to thinking about the height of the pandemic when we were all sheltering in place. One of the first things that was closed when they were saying shelter in place, don't go outside, don't go anywhere. We thought about restaurant and bars, and those industries were like, shut. Oh, and hairstylists. There were a lot of very upset women who couldn't get their hair cut and their hair color. I was like, baby, where are you going? You trying to do it for Zoom? Okay. But we saw that, we saw that shift, that a lot of people in that industry, in the hospitality industry, they were out of work. They were not making money. However, comma space, if we looked at grocery stores started hiring, and other companies started hiring as well. Everybody was door dashing and Uber eating and all of the above. Instacarting, my gosh, Instacart was off the rails. So they were looking, that gig economy and those gig jobs were through the roof. So when we talk about those jobs and availability of jobs, we have to stay focused on where that shift is, and understanding when that shift occurs, how salaries and pay plays into that as well.
See, jobs are out there. It's the
Yeah.
quality of job that's different.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that plays into pay as well. When you're talking about the quality of job, what are you talking about?
So CPI data, unemployment rates, all that data doesn't take into account the type of role, right? You could add 30,000 jobs on the manufacturing assembly line front and reduce 30,000 engineering jobs. Well, those jobs don't equate.
But
right?
that's not a quality issue, though. That's not a quality issue. I'm putting you on the spot with that, the quality of job. Because, and I think back to people who have worked in manufacturing, they have made significant income, nice retirement. I feel like that's the go into work and then you leave work when it's done. You don't have to take work home. You don't have to take work home with you. So I always just want to level set when we say the quality of job, because we don't want to dismiss a type of job for another job.
No. I don't mean it in good quality, bad quality. I
Okay.
mean it as in the sense of two very different things.
Okay.
Like two very different jobs in the sense of all. I'm not saying that,
Gotcha.
blue collar, white collar, these suck and these are great. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the two roles don't align based on everything else that's going on.
Okay. I don't want anyone like me to say, yeah, what does he mean by quality of job? What's, so just making sure we're being.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm not saying that, one job is crappy and the other one is good. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is that the roles themselves don't align. The professions don't align. And so, yes, people can pivot to one or the other and do that type of thing. But the I guess the day-to-day responsibilities, those things don't align. So you still have people that are underqualified, even for these manufacturing jobs, coming
Yeah.
in, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You can add a crap ton of jobs, but if nobody's qualified to do it, well, then guess what? Now you're just going to start overpaying on the other end to do the exact same type of thing, and then it becomes a problem on that side. Now it's over here. It just becomes a weird cyclical problem, and that's what people aren't understanding.
And it's cyclical, so it's nothing new. What were you gonna say? What were you gonna
No.
say, Ron?
Well, I think too, when he's talking about quality of jobs, it's relative. If you look
Mhm.
at the guy who is the IT engineer, lost his
Yep.
position, having to pivot and go work on a manufacturing line, that's a different quality level for that person, right? It's like the $45,000 pay you were talking about, going from
Yeah.
whatever you were to that. That definitely lowers your quality of living from what you were accustomed to or used
Yeah.
to, and those people probably can't afford to stay where they are with their homes or their expenses. They're going to have to find way if they make that jump. That's the difference in current quality of jobs for relativity, I guess. Something
The
has to
last
give.
time the Fed did this, the last time the Fed did this, it was a good 5 years where they had to keep the rates so low. I mean, where it was next to nothing. And then again, it was a weird cyclical problem where the cost of borrow rates were so low and all this other stuff. It just kept happening. Yeah, the quality, when I'm talking about the quality of job, I'm talking about the quality of life that you're going to be living after you accept one of these other roles. Like
Yeah.
the probability of you having to cut and the probability of you having to change your lifestyle, yes. Who's willing to do that?
And at some point, people are going to be forced to do it, right?
Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
can't find something there. I mean, right now, people aren't willing. At some point, you may not have the choice.
Well,
And it's definitely going to get uglier before it gets prettier.
and I would say we see how people respond to when their quality of life is put front and center. We saw that during the height of 2020 and during the pandemic. So
Mhm.
it is something that I would say companies need to take a better look at. And it goes back to budgeting. And I know we know a lot of companies with their fiscal set up to end at the end of June, even though they start doing their budgets at the end of 2022, they're still reviewing those budgets again. So not only are we looking at, when we're talking about quality of life, inflation, salary, and pay, we also need to take in, and we talked a little bit about commissions as well. We also need to talk about benefits. How are benefits affected, especially because this is a top of the year? How those benefits will translate throughout the rest of 2023 and what will be cut, looking at medical benefits, because we know even over the last 2 years, medical benefits have increased, not just because of COVID, but here I am talking about mental health again, but mental health was a big piece of that as well. So yeah, there's so much that's affected, and it would be nice if there was someone that could just stop and say, okay, stop, take a look, and look at what's going on. What I find interesting when we're talking about pay and these new positions that are out there with pay that's less than what was typical market rate is I would love to see how many executive level CEOs, C-suite executive levels have taken a pay cut or have opted out of their bonus or opted out of some of their benefits. It's very rare. I mean, we've seen a few who said it, but they'll say, oh, for 2023. But baby, let's go back to 2022 because you were riding that big old wave. It was like, what's that wave that just happened in Hawaii, Big Eddie? You were riding that big old wave, but yeah, you want to cut it in 2023 because you took what you could in 2021 and 22.
But these types of situations cause honest people to start becoming dishonest. Let me
Ooh,
just put it that way. And what I mean by that is, okay, I'll sign your NDA. I'll sign your non-compete. Don't think I'm not going to look, especially if I just had to take a 50, 60K pay cut.
yeah.
Well, and that
That's what I'm
creates an
talking about.
angst as well, right? People feel like, okay,
Yep.
I took this pay cut for X amount, you're going to get X amount of me now. I already feel slighted. You're only going to get $50,000 worth of me. If I was, know this job was normally paying 150 or what have you. So
that's called work. That's called working your wage, and that is now a statement that is very true. I'm gonna work my wage.
Yeah.
You want me to work 12 hours? Maybe.
I have to.
But if you notice that organizations are forcing people to start coming back into the office so they can monitor that type of stuff too, right?
Yeah.
They know.
Well, and then that plays back into the salary where, like what I was saying, when I took the pay cut, it was because not the 45,000, because I did not take that, but the other pay cut that I took, it allowed me the opportunity to go back to school because I wasn't in traffic for 30 minutes to an hour. That's something that a lot of companies aren't thinking about. If you're causing people to go back to the office, then you're also taking away more time from them. And as we all know, what time is money.
Money.
This
is going to be a thing that's going to consistently keep happening until changes in the actual financial system occur. When that is, who knows? It could be right around the corner. It could be 10 years from now. Who knows? But once we start identifying that this is a real problem, that we just keep sweeping things under the rug and hoping that things get better, and it never does, and then it becomes an even bigger issue. There needs to be an overall fix. And I don't think anybody has the answers for that right now. I mean, I don't think anybody's had answers for that over the last 50 years.
It's there's no fix in place.
No. Like, what's going on right now, was it needed? Yeah. To this extent, probably not. Because human nature is just to have these knee-jerk reactions and have generally our reactions to something bad are a lot more devastating to our fix than anything else. So like, it's kind of like having, when you're super hungry, right? Your eyes get bigger than your stomach. Same type of thing. We got a problem. Start cutting, and then you cut too deep. And then you're forced to hire back again. And then when the market is becoming a little bit more stable, you're gonna have to be forced to pay high all over again. It's just this constant.
That's a cycle. It's been going on forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
And we just keep going through it. Well, the first we talk about knee-jerk reactions. The first one was to do massive layoffs. Now you've got a lot of companies that's got to figure out what's next. We've done all these big layoffs. What's next? You've seen some of the really big companies outsourcing as their answer. I've seen some of those, they're outsourcing their whole HR group and department overseas. So that's the next answer, which in turn just creates more unemployed people within the States. So the answer is all around people at this point and pay, which creates another huge problem.
People and pay.
Into this round of this stuff, right? The first several months there, pay kept rising, which was another challenge of the Fed. Then you've now started seeing those pay reports come out that they are cutting back. Inflation's still rising, which is bad, right? Pay's cutting back, inflation's still rising, hiring's still rising. So again, it goes back to pay being that leading thing that gets hacked first when all the expenses and everything else in the world are still the same or more. So those numbers just don't add up, and the ones that end up suffering are the people working or not working.
Yeah. Whether you call it pay, wages, salary, or compensation, it's money, and we know you want to be paid. So check out the episode notes for resources to help you be more informed about salary ranges for your salary negotiations. And don't forget to follow and subscribe and rate Tip That Scale. Just like you, we want a high number too.